Tomasz was not a man who looked for adventure. He lived in a small earth colony on the edge of known space, a quiet settlement built among tall trees and wide rivers. Most days he worked with his hands, fixing machines, helping farmers, or hunting in the forest for food. He liked simple things. He liked peace. One late afternoon, Tomasz went deeper into the forest than usual. The sun was falling behind the trees, and the air was filled with the sound of night birds. He carried a small bag and a tool, ready to check a broken sensor the colony had placed near the river. It was supposed to warn if wild animals came close to the farms, but for days it had stopped sending signals. As he reached the spot, Tomasz heard something unexpected. It was not the cry of an animal or the rustle of leaves. It was the sound of children. The sound was faint, almost like a whimper carried by the wind. He paused and listened again. Yes, it was there, soft but clear, the sound of young voices. Tomasz followed the sound through the thick trees until he came to a small clearing. What he saw made him stop where he stood. Two small figures sat close together near a fallen log. They were not human children, though they looked close enough to make him blink in surprise. Their skin was smooth and marked with faint glowing lines, as if light moved under their flesh. Their eyes were large and bright, almost shining in the dim light. They wore torn clothes that looked strange, built of thin silver-like material. The children looked weak and afraid. One of them held the other tightly, as if protecting a younger sibling. When Tomasz stepped forward, both turned their heads quickly. Their eyes widened in fear, and the smaller one gave a soft cry. Tomasz raised his hand slowly, showing he had no weapon. "It is all right," he said gently. "I will not harm you." The children did not understand his words, but they seemed to understand the calm in his voice. The older one tilted its head, studying him carefully. The younger one pressed closer, trembling. Tomasz looked around. There were no crash marks, no shelter, nothing that explained how these two ended up alone in the forest. He could not just leave them there. His heart told him what he must do. He took a step closer and lowered himself to one knee so he did not seem so tall. From his bag, he pulled out a small pack of dried food and a bottle of water. He placed them on the ground and pushed them gently toward the children. For a moment, neither moved. Then the older child stretched out a hand with long, delicate fingers. It touched the food carefully, sniffed it, then broke a piece and gave it to the younger one. The younger child ate quickly, eyes bright with sudden hunger. Tomasz felt a small smile rise on his face. "See, no danger," he whispered. The older child tasted the food as well, then looked back at him with eyes that seemed to glow softly in the twilight. It made a sound, something between a word and a note. Tomasz could not understand, but he heard no fear in it. He reached out a hand, very slow, giving them time to move if they wished. The younger one pressed against the older again, but after a long moment, the older child touched his hand with its small fingers. The touch was warm. Tomasz felt a strange emotion rise in his chest. These were children, alone and lost. Whatever they were, whatever world they came from, they needed someone. The air grew colder as night came. Tomasz looked back at the path to the colony. He knew it would be dangerous to leave them out here. Wild animals roamed the forest, and the nights grew bitter. He made his choice. He took off his outer coat and wrapped it gently around both of them. They shivered but did not resist. The younger one leaned against him as if too tired to fight anymore. "Come," he said softly. "I will take you somewhere safe." The children did not know his words, but they seemed to understand the tone. The older one gave a small nod, lifting the younger in its arms. But they were too weak to walk far. So Tomasz lifted them carefully, one in each arm. They were lighter than human children, almost weightless. The smaller one let out a soft sound, almost like a sigh, and rested its head against his shoulder. As he walked back through the forest, Tomasz felt the older child's eyes watching him closely. It was as if the child was trying to decide if he could be trusted. At last, the child rested its head against him too, whispering a sound that almost felt like the word home. The word struck Tomasz deeply. He did not know where these children came from, or who had lost them. But from that moment, he knew he would protect them. When he stepped into the edge of the colony, night lamps lit the streets. A few people looked up, startled to see him carrying two strange children wrapped in his coat. Murmurs rose at once. But Tomasz did not stop to answer. He went straight to his small house, heart steady and mind clear. Whatever questions would come, whatever dangers might follow, he would face them. Because tonight, two lost children had found him. And to them, he was already more than a stranger. He was their safe place. He was their family. Tomasz woke early the next morning, the soft light of dawn slipping through the small windows of his house. The two children were still asleep on a bed he had made for them from blankets and old sheets. They lay close together, their glowing skin faintly lighting the room. For a moment Tomasz just watched them, wondering what strange journey had brought them here. When he stepped outside, a neighbor called to him. "Tomasz, what did you bring back last night?" The man's voice carried both curiosity and worry. A few others stood nearby, whispering among themselves. Word had spread quickly. Tomasz only shook his head. "They are children," he said simply. "That is all anyone needs to know." The neighbors frowned, but none pressed further. People in the colony trusted Tomasz. He was not a man who lied or caused trouble. Still, he knew he had to be careful. Inside, the children stirred. The younger one rubbed its eyes and sat up, blinking at the strange room. The older child placed a protective arm around the sibling and looked toward Tomasz. Their eyes were cautious but not afraid. "Good morning," Tomasz said softly, setting down food on the small table. He had bread, fruit, and warm milk. The children watched him, then slowly moved closer. The younger one sniffed the bread and began eating with quiet eagerness. The older child followed, breaking food into smaller pieces. Tomasz tried to speak simple words as they ate. He pointed to himself. "Tomasz." Then he placed a hand on his chest. "Tomasz." The children tilted their heads. The older one copied the motion, pointing to Tomasz and repeating a soft sound that almost matched his name. Then Tomasz pointed to the older child. "Name." The child touched its own chest and spoke a short word filled with gentle tones. Tomasz tried to repeat it, stumbling, which made the younger one laugh in a musical voice. The sound was light and warm, and Tomasz found himself smiling. From then on, he practiced words each day. Some he could not shape, but the children seemed pleased by his efforts. Slowly, they also learned his language. They repeated simple words like water, food, house, and friend. The younger one often called him Pa, perhaps their attempt at father. Each time Tomasz heard it, something stirred deep in his heart. Days turned into weeks. The children began to explore the colony yard. At first, the other settlers kept their distance, unsure what to think. But the children laughed, played with stones and sticks, and chased each other just as any young ones would. Their glowing skin frightened some people, but soon others started to smile at their joy. Tomasz taught them how to help with small tasks. They learned to carry water, sweep the floor, and feed the chickens behind the house. The younger one often sang while working, a song in a language Tomasz did not know. The older one was quieter, watching carefully, learning with sharp eyes. One evening, after a day of hard work, Tomasz sat outside by the fire with them. The stars above shone bright. The children pointed upward, speaking words he could not understand, but he guessed they were naming constellations. The older child drew shapes in the dirt with a stick, marking circles and lines that looked like star paths. "Your home," Tomasz guessed, pointing to the drawings. The child looked at him, then at the sky, and nodded slowly. The younger one leaned against Tamash's side, whispering a word softly. Though Tamash did not know the meaning, he understood the feeling. It meant family. It meant safety. But life was not without challenge. Some colonists began to ask questions. Where did they come from? What if others follow? Are we in danger? Tamash always answered with calm. They are children. They need care. That is enough. One night, the colony council sent two men to his home. They asked to see the children. Tamash allowed it, knowing he could not hide them forever. The men looked with wary eyes but saw no threat. They saw only young ones eating soup, smiling shyly at strangers. They must be from a lost ship, one man said. We should report this to Central Command. Tamash shook his head. If Command learns, they may take the children away. They belong here now. Let them stay. The men hesitated, then agreed to remain silent, at least for now. That night, Tamash sat awake, watching the children sleep. He thought of their strange clothes, their glowing skin, and the drawings of stars. They were not from this world, maybe not from any world nearby. Still, they trusted him. They laughed with him. They called him father. As weeks became months, the bond grew stronger. The younger child often held his hand when walking through the colony. The older one began to help him fix machines, learning quickly by watching his hands and copying his work. Sometimes, when Tamash was tired, the older child would bring him water and smile with quiet pride. In time, even the suspicious settlers softened. They saw how the children worked, played, and cared for Tamash. Some gave them gifts, new clothes, wooden toys, and fruit. The children thanked them in broken words and bright smiles. Slowly, the colony began to accept that the strange young ones were part of Tamash's family. Yet Tamash could not forget the night by the fire, when the children had pointed to the stars. Somewhere out there, they had a home. Somewhere out there, someone must be searching for them. He looked at them now, safe and laughing in his small house, and he felt torn. They were his family, but they also belonged to a larger story, one written in the stars above. For now, though, Tamash made a promise in his heart. Whatever came, he would protect them. They were his children, and he was their father. Months passed, and the two alien children became part of the colony's daily life. People who once whispered in fear now greeted them with warm smiles. The younger child played often with human kids, though their glowing skin always made them stand out. The older one spent more time with Tamash, helping him repair machines or carry supplies. Still, Tamash often wondered about their past. Who had lost them? Where had they come from? Some nights he lay awake, listening to their soft voices as they spoke to each other in their strange tongue. He wished he could understand, but he knew only pieces. One afternoon, while walking through the forest to check another broken sensor, Tamash noticed the older child following him. You want to help? Tamash asked. The child nodded, eyes bright. Together they walked deeper into the trees. Near the old riverbank, they found more than a broken sensor. The ground was scarred, trees bent as if something had crashed long ago. The older child stopped suddenly, eyes wide. They rushed forward and dropped to their knees in front of a half-buried object. Tamash hurried after them. Pushing aside branches and dirt, he uncovered a piece of strange metal. It was smooth and curved, unlike any human craft. Faint symbols were carved into its surface, glowing weakly when touched. The older child placed a hand on it and made a sound, almost like a sob. The younger one, who had followed behind, also touched it with trembling fingers. Their voices rose together, speaking words Tamash could not understand but could feel carried deep meaning. Tamash knelt beside them. He brushed away more dirt and found shattered pieces of silver-like material, the same kind their clothes were made of. There were also broken wires, glass shards, and what looked like the remains of a beacon device. A ship, Tomasz whispered. This is where you came from. The children looked at him with tearful eyes, and though he could not understand their language, he understood their pain. They had crashed here, far from home. For the next few days, Tomasz returned to the site with tools. He worked carefully to pull the beacon apart and study its design. It was damaged, but he thought he might repair it enough to work again. The older child stayed by his side, handing him tools, pointing at parts, and sometimes correcting him with small gestures. It seemed they remembered how the device was supposed to function. At night, Tomasz studied the glowing symbols. They did not match any human language, but the children read them easily. With their help, he began to understand basic signs: power, signal, direction. Piece by piece, the beacon came alive again. Lights flickered. A soft hum filled the air. The children pressed close, excitement clear in their eyes. Are you sure about this? Tomasz asked them one evening. If this beacon works, someone out there will hear it. Your people might come. Maybe they are far away, but they could still find you. The older child placed a hand on his shoulder. Then, in broken human words, they said, home, need home. Tomasz looked at them quietly. He felt a heavy weight in his chest. If their people came, would they take the children away from him? Would they see him as only a caretaker, not as family? Still, he could not deny them the chance to be found. They deserved to know their true home. The day the beacon finally lit, the children stood hand in hand. Tomasz switched it on, and a deep blue light shot into the sky before fading to a steady pulse. The hum grew louder, then leveled into a steady rhythm. A signal was being sent far across the stars. The younger child pressed close to Tomasz, whispering something in their own language. The older one looked into the sky with tears in their bright eyes. Back at the colony, people asked questions. What if this brings danger? One farmer asked. What if whoever comes is not friendly? Tomasz only answered with steady words. They deserve to be found. If someone searches for them, it is not danger but family. Still, fear spread quietly among some colonists. Strange ships had been heard of in stories, and not all of them were friendly. Weeks passed with no change. The beacon kept pulsing, but nothing came from the sky. The colony began to forget about it, returning to daily work. But Tomasz noticed the children watching the horizon each night, waiting. Then one evening, as the sun slipped down and stars filled the sky, Tomasz saw something unusual. A faint light moved across the darkness, slower than a falling star, brighter than any satellite. The children noticed too. Their voices rose with excitement, speaking fast in their language. Tomasz felt a chill. Someone had heard the beacon. The light in the sky grew larger each night. The colony council gathered, debating if they should prepare defenses or hide. Tomasz said little. His thoughts were only of the children, who clung to him tighter now, as if afraid of losing him when the moment came. At last, the day came when a low hum filled the air above the forest. Shadows of enormous ships passed through the clouds. The colonists froze in fear, staring upward. Tomasz stood in front of his house, the children by his side. He looked into the sky and knew the past he had uncovered was about to bring the future to his door. The colony had never seen ships like these before. They moved silently through the clouds, huge and graceful, their silver hulls glowing faintly as if lit from within. People gathered in the open fields, staring upward in fear and wonder. Children clung to their parents, and the council called for calm. But no one could look away from the sky. Tomasz stood at the edge of the colony with the two alien children by his side. Their glowing eyes followed the ships, wide with hope. They whispered words in their own tongue, pointing upward with trembling hands. A low hum filled the air as one of the ships descended closer. It slowed above the forest, then a smaller craft broke away, gliding down toward the ground. Dust swirled as it landed on the riverbank. The colonists shouted in alarm. Some wanted to hide. Others wanted to raise weapons. But Tomasz held up his hands. "Wait," he said firmly. "Do not fight. They have come for the children." He could feel the younger one press against his leg, clutching his coat. The older child gripped his hand tightly, their face set with a mix of courage and fear. Tomasz looked down at them and nodded. "I am here. I will not leave you." The smaller craft opened with a hiss, and figures stepped out. They were tall and slender, their bodies marked with the same faint glowing lines as the children. Their eyes shone in the same way too. Their armor seemed woven from light itself, flowing and smooth. Gasps rose from the crowd. "Aliens," someone whispered. The figures looked around, their gaze sweeping over the colonists. Then their eyes fell on the children. In that instant, all formality vanished. The envoys hurried forward, dropping to their knees before the children. They spoke quickly in their own language. The children answered in excited voices, reaching out their hands. The youngest broke free and ran into the arms of one of the envoys, who lifted them high with tears in their shining eyes. The older child, still holding Tomasz's hand, looked up at him uncertainly. Tomasz gave a small nod, releasing the hand. The child stepped forward, and the envoys embraced them too. For a moment Tomasz thought he had lost them already. But then, something unexpected happened. The children pulled away from the envoys and ran back to him. The younger one clung to his leg, and the older one took his hand again, turning to face the envoys firmly. The envoys paused, surprise clear in their glowing eyes. Then they bowed their heads slightly, a gesture of respect. One stepped forward and spoke in broken human words. "You, protector." Tomasz blinked. "Yes," he said simply. The envoy touched their chest and then pointed upward toward the ships. "Queen, knows. Queen come. See protector." A murmur spread through the colonists. "Their queen?" someone asked in fear. Tomasz looked back at his people. "They are not here for war. They are here for family." The council debated quickly, whispering among themselves. Some still wanted to prepare defenses, but no attack had come. The envoys carried no weapons in hand, and their eyes were filled not with anger but with gratitude. In the days that followed, the alien ships remained above the clouds, silent but watchful. The envoys stayed near the river, building a small camp. They did not force entry into the colony, nor did they threaten. Instead, they visited Tomasz often, bringing food and strange gifts for the children. The younger one grew bold and laughed freely with them, though they always returned to sleep in Tomasz's house. The older child balanced between two worlds, speaking with the envoys but never letting go of the bond with Tomasz. The colonists grew uneasy, but Tomasz stood firm. If they wished harm, they would have done so already, he told the council. They wait for something. Or someone. He was right. One evening, a great shadow moved across the sky as the largest ship lowered closer than before. A light beam spread down to the forest, shining like a column of stars. The envoys knelt instantly, their heads bowed. One turned to Tomasz and said in clear words, "Queen come." The children's eyes lit with joy. They tugged at Tomasz's hands, urging him to follow. He felt his heart tighten. The queen herself was coming, not as an enemy but as a mother. What would she say to him, a simple human who had dared to raise her missing young? The beam of light shimmered, and a tall figure emerged. She was unlike the others, taller, her glowing lines brighter, her presence commanding yet gentle. The air seemed to grow still as she stepped onto the earth. The children cried out and ran to her. She dropped to her knees, arms open wide, and gathered them close. For the first time, Tomasz saw her expression. It was not the face of a ruler. It was the face of a mother who had lost her children and found them again. Tears shone in her bright eyes as she held them. Then she looked up at Tomasz. Slowly, she rose to her full height and walked toward him. The colonists held their breath. The queen stopped before him. She placed a hand over her heart and bowed her head. Then, in a voice filled with emotion, she spoke in her language. The envoys translated softly. Mother thanks protector. Mother calls you family. The crowd gasped. Tomasz stood silent, his heart heavy with emotion. He had expected anger, perhaps judgment. Instead, the queen of a distant people had bowed to him, a simple man from a small colony. The children ran back to him, clutching his hands. Their voices rang clear as they called him the word they had learned first. Father. And in that moment, even the queen herself smiled, as if she agreed. The night air was still when the queen stood before Tomasz. The forest around the colony had fallen silent, as if even the animals knew something great was happening. The glow from her body lit the clearing, casting long shadows across the grass. The two children held her hands, but their eyes kept turning back to Tomasz, as if afraid to let him out of sight. The colonists watched from a safe distance. They whispered among themselves, wondering what this meeting meant. Some felt relief, others still feared danger. But no one dared to move closer. The queen studied Tomasz for a long moment. Her gaze was not cold or distant. Instead, it was filled with warmth and deep sorrow, the sorrow of a mother who had been searching for too long. Then she stepped forward, her envoys following behind but keeping a respectful distance. She raised her hand to her heart, then slowly extended it toward Tomasz. Her voice rang out in her own language, but one envoy quickly translated. She says, you gave what even our people could not. You gave love when there was none. You gave home when there was no home. Tomasz stood still, unsure how to answer. I only did what anyone would have done, he said quietly. They were alone. They needed someone. The envoy translated, and the queen listened carefully. Then she spoke again, her words soft but strong. The translation followed. She says, no, not anyone. Many would fear. Many would turn away. You did not. You are more than a guardian. You are father. The children nodded eagerly, pressing closer to Tomasz as if to prove her words. The younger one smiled through shining eyes, whispering the word they always used. Father. Tomasz felt his throat tighten. He had been called many things in his life, but never that. To hear it from them, and now to hear the queen herself say it, was almost too much to hold. The queen motioned for the envoys to bring something forward. They carried a tall staff carved with glowing symbols. At the top, a crystal pulsed with gentle light. The queen placed the staff in the ground between them, as if marking the moment. She bowed her head once more, then raised her voice for all to hear. The envoy translated with solemn care. She says, before the stars, I declare this human family. What is ours is his. What is his is ours. He is no longer stranger. Gasps spread through the colony. The people could hardly believe what they were hearing. A queen of another world was calling a human man her kin. The queen then looked to the colonists. She lifted both hands in peace. She says, we did not come for war. We did not come for land. We came for children. We found children. And we found more. We found trust. The tension in the air slowly eased. People lowered their weapons. Parents pulled their own children closer, realizing the truth in her words. Later, Tomasz was invited aboard the alien flagship. The children insisted on bringing him. They held his hands as they walked up the beam of light that carried them into the ship. Inside, Tomasz felt as though he had stepped into another world. The halls glowed softly, with walls that seemed alive, shifting like flowing water. Strange patterns lit the paths, and gentle music filled the air. Everywhere he looked, aliens bowed their heads as the queen passed, but their eyes also rested on him with wonder. The queen led him to a vast chamber filled with high windows that opened to the stars. At the center stood a great throne, not of gold or stone, but of woven light. Yet she did not sit upon it. Instead, she knelt with her children before Tamash. "Mother thanks protector," the envoy translated once more. "Mother does not forget. Mother asks, will you walk beside us?" Tamash blinked, taken aback. "I am only a man of the colony," he said. "I have no crown, no power." The queen spoke firmly, and the envoy translated. She says, "Power is not in crown. Power is in heart that chooses love. You raised children of stars. That is more than any throne." The children hugged him then, one on each side. Tamash closed his eyes for a moment, feeling their warmth, and wondered how his simple life had led to this moment. When they returned to the colony, the people welcomed them with less fear. The queen stood side by side with Tamash, her envoys forming a circle of protection. She raised her staff again, and the crystal shone like a star. The envoy's voice rang out. She says, "As long as stars burn, this man and his people are not alone. We call them family." Cheers rose slowly, hesitant at first, then stronger. For the first time, humans and aliens stood together not as strangers, but as kin. That night, as Tamash sat by the fire with the children, he thought about what had been said. The queen had called him father. She had called him family. He did not know what the future would bring, but he knew one truth. The bond he shared with the children had changed more than his life. It had changed the fate of two worlds. And above, the alien ships glowed like guardians of the night, not as invaders but as kin who had come home. Life in the colony changed after the arrival of the alien queen. The ships no longer hovered in silence like watchers. Instead, they lowered smaller craft to share supplies of food, medicine, and tools that humans had never seen before. The colonists, though nervous, accepted the gifts. Still, whispers filled the streets each day. "Why are they here so long?" some asked. "What if they take our land?" Others said, "Maybe they mean no harm. Maybe this is a new age." Tamash heard both sides. He understood the fear, but he also saw the truth in the queen's eyes. She had not come to conquer. She had come for her children. Yet he knew that trust was a fragile bridge, and it could break if either side moved too quickly. The children, meanwhile, seemed to live in two worlds at once. During the day, they played with human children, chasing each other across fields and laughing with joy. At night, they stayed close to the queen's envoys, learning words of their own language and listening to stories of stars and kingdoms far away. One evening, Tamash sat outside with them. The older child drew shapes in the dirt again, circles and lines that looked like star maps. The younger one leaned on Tamash's shoulder, eyes heavy with sleep. "You belong to both worlds now," Tamash said quietly, though he was not sure they understood. "You have your people, and you have us." The older child looked at him and nodded slowly. Then they placed their hand on his, a simple gesture that needed no words. But not everyone felt the same peace. Some colonists gathered in secret, fearing that the aliens would never leave. They spoke of warning Central Command, of calling for Earth's warships to protect them. Tamash learned of this through a friend, and his heart grew heavy. If Earth's ships came, there might be no peace. Misunderstanding could turn into battle, and battle could take everything away. He decided to speak. At the next council meeting, he stood before both colonists and envoys. The queen herself attended, her presence filling the room with quiet strength. "Friends," Tamash began, "I know fear lives in many hearts. These ships above us are large, and their power is greater than ours. But I have lived with their children. I have seen their hearts. They do not come for war. They come for family. Some council members frowned. And if you are wrong? What if they only wait for us to lower our guard? The queen rose then, her staff glowing softly. She spoke through her envoy. She says, if we wanted war, we would not wait. We would not give food. We would not bow to a human man. We bow because he is father to our children. And so we bow to all his people too. The council fell silent. None could deny the truth in her words. Still, fear lingered. In the following days, Tomasz walked often between the colony and the alien camp. He spoke with both sides, answering questions, calming worries. The children followed him, their laughter bridging the gap better than words ever could. When human children played with them, even the most doubtful settlers softened. One day, a young farmer saw the older alien child help repair a broken water pump. "Your hands work like ours," the farmer said with surprise. The child only smiled and nodded. That small moment spread through the colony like fire, proved that they were not so different after all. The queen, too, sought to build trust. She invited the colony leaders aboard her ship, showing them the gardens that grew in light-filled halls, the great windows that opened to endless stars, and the chambers where songs of her people filled the air. She shared not weapons, but stories of loss, of searching, and of hope found again. Slowly, walls began to fall. Humans and aliens ate meals together, trading simple words and gestures. Children from both sides ran through the fields without fear. For the first time, the colony felt less like a frontier and more like the heart of something new. Yet Tomasz knew it was not simple. Peace needed more than kind words. It needed time. Some colonists still whispered of danger. Some aliens still wondered why their children clung so tightly to a human man. But the bond of family could not be denied. One night, as the stars shone above, the queen visited Tomasz at his small house. The children were asleep inside, their soft glow lighting the room. She stood at the door, tall and regal, yet her eyes gentle. Through her envoy, she spoke. She says, "You gave us more than life. You gave us love. For this, we will not forget. But you must choose, Tomasz. Will you walk only with your people, or will you walk with us too?" Tomasz looked at her, then at the sleeping children. His heart knew the answer, though his mind was heavy with the weight of it. "I will walk where they walk," he said at last. "They are my family. That is all I need." The queen bowed her head, her glowing lines brightening with emotion. Then, the envoy translated, "We are bound. Not by treaty. Not by power. By family." In that moment, Tomasz understood. The children were no longer just lost young ones he had found in the forest. They were the bridge between two worlds. And through them, he too had become part of something greater than himself. The colony had feared war, but what had come instead was a bond stronger than any weapon. A bond that might carry humans and aliens together into the stars. The colony never looked the same after the queen's visit. Where once fear had filled the air, now there was cautious hope. Farmers spoke less about war and more about trade. Children of both kinds ran together through the fields, their laughter echoing across the settlement. The alien ships still hovered in the sky, but they no longer seemed like shadows. They seemed like guardians, watching over the bond that had been born. Tomasz walked each morning with the children. The younger one still held his hand tightly, while the older one carried tools or books to learn more about human life. At the same time, both of them grew closer to their alien family, speaking their language with ease and learning the ways of their people. They were changing, but not drifting away. Instead, they carried both worlds within them. One evening, the queen called Tomasz to her ship. The halls glowed with soft light, filled with scents of flowers that grew in crystal gardens. She welcomed him not as an outsider, but as a family member. Through her envoy, she spoke with warmth. She says, "We are ready to return to our stars. But before we leave, we must ask. Do the children stay with us, or do they remain with you?" The words struck Tamash's heart. He had always known the moment would come, yet he had hoped it might never arrive. The children stood beside him, eyes wide and uncertain. They loved their mother, but they also loved the man who had raised them through years of danger and need. Tamash knelt before them. "You do not have to choose one and lose the other," he said softly. "No matter where you go, I will always be your family." The older child placed their glowing hand on his shoulder. "Both," they whispered in broken human words. "We want both." The queen heard and bowed her head. She spoke again through the envoy. She says, "Then so it shall be. You are their father. I am their mother. They will walk both paths. You will not be left behind." The decision shocked the colony when Tamash shared it. Some thought it dangerous, for a human to be bound so closely with alien royalty. Others smiled, seeing it as proof that peace was real. But none could deny the bond that tied them together. The following days became a festival. Humans and aliens shared songs and meals. Fires lit the night, and voices carried across the fields. The queen walked among the people, tall and regal, yet smiling as she watched her children dance with both their families. For the first time in history, humans and another race celebrated as one. But when the festival ended, the time for parting arrived. The queen's ships prepared for departure, their lights glowing brighter than stars. Colonists gathered to watch, unsure if they would ever see the aliens again. Tamash stood with the children at his side, his heart heavy yet proud. The queen stepped forward, her staff shining. She raised it high, and her envoy spoke her final words to the colony. She says, "You gave us love when we had only loss. You gave us home when we had no land. We will not forget. Where our ships travel, your name will travel too." Then she turned to Tamash. She says, "Our paths are joined. When you call, we will answer. When you need, we will come." The children hugged her tightly, tears glowing on their cheeks. Then they ran back to Tamash, holding both his hands. The queen smiled, her lines bright with emotion. With a final bow, she returned to her ship. Engines roared like thunder, and the great vessels rose into the sky. Slowly, they vanished into the stars, leaving silence and wonder behind. The colony stood still for a long time, watching the sky where the ships had gone. At last, one child whispered, "They will come back." Others nodded, believing it too. Tamash felt the younger child press close to him, while the older one still held his hand. They were not gone. They were still here, and he was still their father. That was all that mattered. Life returned to normal in the weeks that followed, but it was a new kind of normal. The colonists no longer felt alone in the vast galaxy. They had allies, friends, and family among the stars. Tamash became a bridge between them, guiding talks, building trust, and raising the children who carried both legacies within them. Years later, when new ships arrived from Earth, the settlers told the story. They spoke of how one man raised the lost children of another world, and how even an alien queen had bowed her head to him. They spoke of family stronger than fear, and peace stronger than war. And when the children grew older, they carried that story into the stars. They visited their mother's people, yet always returned to the colony. They built schools, farms, and starships, weaving two cultures into one. And at the center of it all was Tamash, the father who had never turned away. In time, he grew old, his hair gray and his steps slow. But when he sat by the fire and looked at the sky, he no longer feared the unknown. For he had learned the truth that few ever discover. The galaxy was vast, filled with wonders and dangers. Yet family, once found, could bind even the stars together. And so the tale spread across both worlds. The humans remembered it as proof that kindness could build more than armies. The aliens remembered it as the day their queen called a human man her kin. Tomash never sought glory, never sought to change the fate of worlds. He only chose to protect two children. But in that choice, he gave birth to something greater than empires. He gave birth to peace. And in every corner of the sky, the children of both species whispered the same truth. A truth simple enough for all to understand. Family is forever.